money.
Welcome. This is another episode of Practice Prosperity. We're joined by our special guest, Tonika Dew Evans, licensed professional counselor. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Of course, we're going to talk about businesses. We're going to talk about relationships, dealing with job loss and working, and some of the things she's working with her clients. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation that I think touches everybody who's listening today. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Randall, for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Very good. So to start us off, can you
Mhm.
please introduce yourself, the practice that you have, and the type of clients that you serve?
Absolutely. My name is Tonika Dew Evans. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm in private practice in Stockbridge, Georgia, and my practice is all in due time, where I am working with adult clients and couples.
Very cool. Very cool. And what drew you to that work? You could touch a lot of people, kids,
Mhm.
teens, young adults. Why did you decide to serve that population?
Well, when I began, Randall, I initially thought that I would work with everyone. I would be this family therapist that would support the children, the teens, the adults. I would work with everyone, groups, all the things. And then as I began my practice, my first client in private practice was in January of 2017, and then I was working with children, 10 and older. And then after a while began to see that it was I believe I saw myself supporting and having more outcomes with the adults, those who were able to make their decisions in that moment without there having to be additional conversation with a guardian or a parent. And then finding that a lot of the things that were coming up with the adults were questions about their relationship. And they were not in therapy with their partners, but they were learning these different skills and wanting to use them to enhance their relationships. And the more I began to do that work, I saw that it was better suited for me if I centered around that adult demographic and couples. And so it was a few years in the making to whittle down to that group, but that's where I've landed, and I feel good about it.
Like that. So take us back a little bit to that point, because a lot of business owners, they either have to pivot, target a different client base. Um, at that moment where you're like, well, this may not be working as well as I think it is, or I see this
Hmm.
opportunity, explain those emotions, because if we can make that rule, we can kind of normalize it for business owners.
Hmm. Um, I think the biggest thing for me was that I know that in this work, it is about healing and supporting and recovery. And in order for someone to do that in a healthy space, you, the person who's assisting them or accompanying them, must determine where you are better suited. And as I said before, working with the children and adolescent, what I found is um, that they weren't, as I said before, able to make those decisions on their own. And so I said, okay, let me see how I can fully be present and support. And so it wasn't because I was already serving that population, it wasn't so much of a pivot. It was just me realizing where I may have been better suited because there are additional trainings and things that are needed when you're working with children and adolescents. When you, depending on their age and how they're functioning cognitively, then you may need to consider your play therapies and different trainings. And so we're licensed and we have to have 35 hours here in the state of Georgia, 35 hours every 2 years. You would need to really make sure that you're getting that specific training. And so for me, it was okay, where can I best serve and have outcomes that are favorable for my clients? And so it wasn't so much a pivot as it was a decision in how I was feeling in doing this work and having to honor that. And I think that it's really important as a clinician that we consider um, how we are feeling and doing and processing this work in order that we may better serve our client.
So something that kids don't have to deal with is finances. And
Mm,
specifically with adults, a lot of times adults do like to pair together. And there's a
mm-hmm,
struggle sometimes about money identity. Like, why do couples, given your experience, struggle with money?
mm-hmm, mm. Um, for whatever reason, Randall, no one's talking about it before they have to talk about it.
Mhm.
They're not having the conversation before the conversation is needed. It's what I found in my practice working with couples, I use an assessment called Prepare Enrich. Prepare Enrich has 12 focus areas that the couples take an assessment, and in this assessment, it has these 12 areas. One of them being finances. And in that, I am often surprised when I've had couples who've been together 10, 15, maybe even 30 years, and there's so much variance in terms of their response. Not that you're looking for them to be the same, but more of a match than what it is. And sometimes it's coming in the space and they're operating from different spaces. I call it their money story. They're not having this conversation of what it was like growing up, how finances were discussed or not, if there were any concerns or issues with bills being paid or anything like that. So they're coming and they're just saying, we'll figure it out. And usually the figuring out um, doesn't have a real conversation until there's a job loss or a cut in pay or an expected promotion that would have been more money and it wasn't. And then it's, oh goodness, we have this debt. And so I think it's because they're not talking about it is what usually begins some of the discord around finances.
That's interesting. And I've noticed in my work that surprisingly, the older the couple when they come together are, the less
Mm-hmm,
they discuss and disclose about money.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Have
I
you
would agree.
seen that? And do you have an explanation why that may be?
Mhm. I would agree that I've seen that, and it's primarily been based on this is how we managed before. We were doing well, especially if these are clients who are in higher earning
Mhm.
roles and they've not had any issue with bill payment or credit scores or home ownership. And so they come in saying, this is how I've done it. And so it should work without considering that if there's a match, so to speak, with how you are earning, that there are still differences in terms of how you handle your financial affairs. And so they don't talk about it. So my money is over here, your money is over here, and we'll pay this. It's interesting when they talk about your half. They pay their half, I pay my half, and you're going, okay, half, but we're together.
Yes.
So how do we pay halves? And then there's no conversation about when we pay. It's just an expectation of doing it. So you don't know how the other one is having the money, where the money is. So it's always interesting. I mean, in some cases it works.
Yeah.
It varies between people how they show up and what it looks like for them. But I have seen that in couples who specifically have um, higher wage earnings, higher wage earnings that they're not talking about it because it just gets done.
Yeah. Let's specifically talk about those higher earners.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenges they face coming together with money when you sprinkle in cultural expectations. So
Okay.
they're both higher earning
Mm-hmm.
individuals. And now they have to come together financially, but still deep down inside, even though they may have quote unquote escaped some cultural expectations that they have to follow because they earn more money, those still
Mm-hmm.
appear, raise their head up consistently over time. So what is the challenges high earning folks have when they couple up specifically around money?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think it just may vary on who the people are, what is deemed priority in terms of their relationship to have that discussion. Again, if it looks like everything is well, then we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
I think we're in a society now that has a lot of focus on status
Mhm,
and
mhm, mhm, mhm.
possession ownership. And so with that, um, if you're coming and you have the most recent car um, or home, um, or any of those things, then sometimes it's how it presents. And so because that is the case, many people aren't talking because it looks like everything is okay. Then if you have and it could be and when we talk about coming together when they're older, it could be varying reasons. Some persons are marrying later. We're seeing a lot of that where couples are marrying later, where, maybe 10 years ago, you had people in their late 20s, early 30s that were getting married. And now we're having people in their late 30s, early 40s that are getting married. And so they're established
Yeah,
in their own right. And so I believe that again, it may vary in terms of what that conversation looks like based on the individual couple and the individuals themselves.
makes sense. So I speak to, college students, some high school students, and early on in my career, when I first went to these classes, we would talk
Mm-hmm.
about things like marriage, and I would say, who raise your hand if you want to become married, and
Mm-hmm.
the number of hands are going down frequently. Um,
Yeah.
I sometimes interact with individuals overseas, and they are saying that marriage is just not a priority.
Mm-hmm.
How is marriage or people coming together going to change in the future? Like, if you had a crystal ball, what do you see happening? Like, I don't see marriage as a priority, even though we all know that's the best way to level up financially.
Mm. Well, what I'm seeing, I'm noticing that there's not a rush to the altar, but there are relationships that are being formed and sustainable relationships where they're not married, but they are coupled
Mhm.
and have that dynamic of a married life. They're sharing finances, children, buying homes, and doing those things. I believe that there is some influence outside of the worlds that many of us reside in, that include television, that include TikTok, that include Instagram, that are giving interpretations of relationship. And I think there's some mimicking that's happening. I'm also seeing that I've had couples who are speaking about divorce, who have been married 20 plus years as well. And so we have to consider how their children, are perceiving relationship as a result of divorces ending after decades of marriage. Um, in all of that, what I am seeing is that there's limitations to how they're communicating and what they're communicating. It's believed in some instances where I've seen where the belief has been we don't have to be married because one partner may have said they don't want to be, and the other one is believing that if they say they do, then this ends this relationship, or the delay on marriage again because what has been witnessed by their own lived experience, either through their parents or family. So my crystal ball prediction would be: I believe people are still going to fall in love, have children, um, and decide if they marry first or later, or decide to just be coupled. And that's one of the things that I do in my work. I provide premarital counseling, and then I also provide couples counseling for people who are not married. And I've had couples who've been together 20 years and they've never married. And I don't ask them why they haven't married unless there's something that's presenting about them not being married. So,
What do you think the effect on society may be because of this new coupling dynamic?
mm,
I would assume, marriage sometimes is, they call it the ball and chain. It is an anchor. So without that anchor, people may split faster. Um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
as you mentioned, people are having kids before married. That's more common than not.
mm-hmm,
What do you think is going to happen to society itself because of these decisions?
mm. I think with us not seeing many people wanting to marry or making that what many people described it as a piece of paper, but what it is actually, as you talk about, just foundationally what it can do for society, what it can create in our own respective communities. Um, I think that there may be um, this continued drive of individualism, which is outside of the true functioning of community, right? We're not alone. We should be together. Um, I'm not one who says you have to be married, but when people say they don't want to, if it's only just saying because it's a piece of paper, that's really not giving a true meaning or definition of your refusal or hesitancy or resistance to the union. And so um, I think it takes this space of, again, as I said, there are couples who've been together years, maybe even decades, who've not been married. I think it still comes back to, how do you see yourself? What do you believe relationship is? Because I've had couples in my office, 30 years married, who are contemplating not being together because um, they've grown, but not only that, they weren't who they thought they were when they got married. Same, not having the conversation about money, not having the conversation about what they wanted. So I don't know. I think it may create this gap and some discord with relationship. But the individualism plays out in what we see when people say, I don't need anybody, or I'm okay by myself. And I believe that we do have to do some work by ourselves, but I also believe that we need to have connection. Um, and I think that void of it is not just about the institution of marriage, it's also how people are perceiving themselves.
That's spot on. One thing that you'd mentioned, and I see a lot of discourse comes when somebody loses a job. When
Mm,
money is flowing, we're
mm,
eating out like we want to,
yes.
vacations are good, the kids are in
Mm-hmm,
private school,
mm-hmm,
everything is awesome.
yeah.
But when the job loss happens, I mean, so much stuff changes. Let's take a step back and say, what really happens to an individual when they lose their job?
It's so many things. One of the things that's not discussed is grief.
Mm,
There's a grief component to job loss, and there's so much brushing over that. Just society, and in our society, there is no true acknowledgement of grief. We're trying to figure out, when do I stop feeling like this while I avoid feeling like this.
mm,
So I think there's a grief component, and in that, it's because it's a loss.
yes.
There's sometimes loss of identity, depending on how long you've worked. There's a
Mhm.
loss of community if you've forged relationships there. There's a loss, specifically and most importantly, financially. There's this loss where if you've not saved, or if that was your only means, if you've been living, the paycheck to paycheck. So I believe the grief that shows up in job loss um, is dismissed. And because we're not naming what these emotions are, we then tend to fall in this space of, what was wrong with me? Why did
Mhm.
I lose the job? What could I have done more of? All of these symptoms of grief show up, but we don't name it. So I believe that that's the biggest factor. And then coupled with, what do I do next? High levels of anxiety, a lot of projecting out about what's going to happen, sometimes doom and gloom if there's not been any planning before, if there's no savings. Um, and then, shame.
Mm.
This firing was a result of something that was done or not done. And so there's so many things that can show up, and depending on how the person is emotionally and mentally prior to the job loss, will impact how significantly they are affected um, after the job loss.
Because when people come together and meet, possibly for the first time, they say, I'm so and so, and I work for so and so, and this is what I do. Say
Mm-hmm,
that a
mm-hmm,
hundred times when you meet so many different people, and to strip that away and you say,
mm-hmm.
hey, I'm so and so, and you don't have the rest of that statement, that's tough. I remember
Yeah,
the first time
absolutely.
I was laid off, and you speaking about it now, I thought about, like, yeah, I laid down that whole weekend.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
couldn't handle because I did not know how to process this emotion of no longer having that job, having that title, not working. I think that
Mm-hmm.
is so if somebody loses a job and let's say they're coupled up, and I tell couples this all the time that when you marry somebody, expect a period of time where they won't be working. And if they're not
Yeah.
working, do you still love that person and want to be that person? I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to what happens, couples going along good, and somebody loses a job and now their income is literally cut in half. Like
Mm-hmm.
what happens in that dynamic?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, Again, it's individual couples, right? Just in terms of what their planning is. If we look at it from one space, a couple who's had conversation about some of these what ifs and projecting out, if there's been this savings, there can still be some frustration if you're seeing the other person not going to work and you're having to go to work, or if that person has one person is the one who spends more than the other, and you're not having these conversations about how you will work together when one is not employed. So there's can be varying emotions that come up from there. There can be frustration with someone not working. There can be resentment.
Yeah.
um, there can be anger. um, it could be some disappointment in terms of what you expected your your livelihood or your relationship to look like. You mentioned the no vacations or those spending habits having to change. And so one of the things, again, when that happens, there's limited conversation about the feelings and the emotions that are connected to the loss. Again, we're just saying, people lose their jobs all the time. We'll just find another job. You can look, and it's all of this talk about you're good, you're committed to your work, and this building up of that without leaving the space for you to lie down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Like being able to say, I know you lost your job. What are your thoughts? How are you feeling?
mm-hmm,
And being able to receive that, not from being, some people have thought, I've heard it in session and even with friends, I don't want to be pacified. I don't want anybody doing anything because they feel sorry for me. But then in relationships, though, there's supposed to be support and empathy and compassion. And we, meaning society, has created this space that if someone says, let me help you, how are you, or I'm sorry to hear that, then it's from this space of, you don't have anything, I need to be here for you, you can't do anything. And they don't see it as a space of support, where you can be gentle with yourself in this regard rather than beating yourself up. So I believe that it just varies, but there's so many emotions that can come up as a result of that.
because what I've seen is specifically talking from a man's perspective, you can go through a depression to where you don't have that energy
Mm.
to look for a job.
Mm-hmm.
How does, let's say, a wife hold space for that? Because I think that's really hard. You have
Mm-hmm.
cultural expectations of somebody being a breadwinner, cultural
Mm-hmm.
expectations of a lifestyle preference, but now you're in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where somebody is down and out, your partner or somebody who you're dating, sharing
Mm-hmm.
finances, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't even have the energy. This can go on for months. This can go on for years. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you recommend folks hold space, whether or not they should or shouldn't hold space for that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I believe that if you're in a committed and loving relationship,
Mm-hmm.
your first instinct is going to want to hold that space.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to take into account, no one, even as a clinician, if I see anything that, I'm not treating anyone in my family, and especially my husband,
Yeah.
because that's, first off, it's unethical, and the other part is that is not our dynamic, right? And so one of the things is that we sometimes believe we have to do this alone. And what I encourage partners, and spouses, if you're together, is that you play to your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you can do. And when you need support, you can go outside of yourselves in terms of finding those supports. So if it is helping your partner find a clinician or someone to speak to, a support group, if it's connecting and encouraging engagement with their own support network, because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can ignore that that exists or not recognize that that's what it's for. The other is allowing some time. You know, when you said you were able to lie down for the weekend. Sometimes people aren't doing that. They're just like, oh, I lost my job and I got to get on it. So you lose your job Friday, Saturday you're doing your resume over, Sunday you're practicing your interview skills, and then Monday you're on LinkedIn, Indeed,
Mhm.
Glassdoor, everywhere you're sending everything out. We have to be in a space of knowing that we can rest
Mhm.
and allow ourselves to recover from this injury, from this loss. And so that's what I would encourage partners to do, is to say to themselves, I'm going to hold space by allowing them to be, to
Mm.
have whatever these emotions and feelings are. And if they're questioning why did it happen, knowing that that is an okay question, that is, it's rhetorical. Don't try to answer it, because you'll give an answer and that answer really isn't what they're wanting. The why is just a calling out. So let them call out. And then maybe encouraging couples to have some of these conversations, especially the climate that we're in now. We're seeing job loss at an all-time high. Um, there are many people who are having to take their severance packages because jobs are downsizing. That's been the biggest thing that I've had within my practice, within couples and with my adult clients. Job loss out of nowhere. You got 2 months, and then they're like, "Wait, but they're month to month. So you tell me I have 2 months. So I don't have anything that I can save in the 2 months, and I'm only going to have that last thing." So I think that if we begin to have conversations about things that can happen, not from this anxious feel space, but in a space that allows us to be proactive. And then when these feelings and emotions come, then we have the opportunity to be with them rather than to rush through.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are listening. It's like, why don't they have those safety and reserves? But the reality is, over 75% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So
Mm-hmm.
them
Mm-hmm.
going without a job for 3 months after unemployment stops can be
Mm-hmm.
devastating.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Absolutely.
tough decisions are made during that point. They say in sports, the best defense is a great offense. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people find their identity in a job, find their
Mm-hmm.
identity in the industry. And that's what hurts a lot when you lose a job. So, how
Mm-hmm.
can somebody diversify their identity so it won't hit home as much, almost building up a level of resiliency, expecting a job loss because and being able to bounce back?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I think that there is some identity that will come with what you do, especially if you've chosen a career or a field where you're passionate about, where you feel led and purpose to be in. Um, Again, I think it goes back to having some healthy discussions around loss, that we don't talk about it. We don't talk about our grief. You know, the phrase or the thing that's been coined in recent years is this toxic positivity, where we immediately have something happen and, it goes to, well, it's not that bad. You at least you have it. It's all those things, and because we're hurrying away from a natural response, it becomes more challenging for us. Um, Again, I think it may have to go back to, if you know why you're doing it, then that doesn't leave you. So if you're I believe, from having conversation with you, you're helping couples financially, but there's a bigger picture around that while you're doing that. And I think if we can look at what's the underlying things of that rather than just the job in itself. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I, I believe this is my purpose work, but at the same time, I know that what that is that I want to see people healthy. I want to help people. And so if I can come back and say, I haven't lost that, even in losing the job, then it allows me to be able to say that I can still help. And until I'm back in the position or the role that I wanted to have, then I can still do those things. That hasn't been lost. The title, the money that has been lost. But what is it about me that remains? but that also comes from you doing work with yourself to be able to have practice some self-care. What are your supports like? And are you leaning into those supports or doing those things that keep you healthy, not from when you need to? It's almost like how you go to the doctor and the week before you're doing those 30 minutes a day and exercise so you can tell the doctor, yeah, last week I walked this. Instead of doing that, they were practicing it. But it comes back to who we are. And most often in this capitalistic society, we've not had an opportunity to do that. And it is, how much am I earning? What can I accumulate? And we used to have a show that was Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and it came on and you would just watch. Now everyone is wanting to portray that lifestyle is there. And so we have people who are getting lost in what's projected and not being able to truly focus on who they are.
Like that. There's a term that you use, and I love definitions, if you can imagine, toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And after you described, I feel like I potentially could be guilty of some of those things. If you don't mind, define a little bit more toxic positivity and how does it show up?
Hmm. Um, what I've seen is it primarily shows up when people mean well. It's
Mhm.
it's not from a place of anyone wanting to cause any harm. It's when the positivity comes when there's no space or admittance that what has occurred should be causing these feelings, these emotions of maybe even despair, anxiety, maybe even depressive symptoms could be coming up. And someone says, well, it's not that bad because,
Mhm.
right? It could be worse. At least you have this that's happening. I know you don't have your job, but you didn't need to have that job anyway. You were too good for that job. Um, you can go and do anything. You don't need to worry about that. Don't cry about not being there anymore. You come in this space and start trying to pour out all these things that are good without being able to acknowledge that what I feel is real. And because there is no space, when you mention about holding space, there is no space being held for me to have these feelings and emotions that are natural, what I call them natural, normal, and necessary. These natural feelings as a result of this loss, normal, and normal in quotes, because I believe that persons have their own individual responses to things, but normal to you, meaning that it's not as you're not in a space where it's completely disrupting your life, but you have had this experience. And it has caused you to pause for a moment. And so you allow yourself to do that. And it's necessary to have the feeling to get to the other side. The denial of the impact doesn't then make everything better. It actually can make it worse. And other symptoms can begin to show up. And where you were able to lie down for a weekend, sometimes people are lying down for a month.
And I never thought about that. I think that's important for couples to just be able to sit and let them go through that journey. Quit trying to hurry it up. Say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's get to the other end because you feel like it's better for them. Better
Mm-hmm.
for them, like you said, could just be go on that roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
be
Mm-hmm.
there. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's important. Now,
Yeah.
one thing that you do, and I touch on a little bit in my work, is you work with adults. And
Mm-hmm.
once somebody achieves their college degree, get the nice job, buy the nice house, have the family, now they're thinking about, now what do I want to do? What
Mm-hmm.
do you
Mm-hmm.
think about kind of purpose, like helping your people that you work with
Mm-hmm.
find their purpose, manifest their purpose? Like, what does that look like for the people or individuals you work with?
Mm. Purpose. Ooh. Um, that can be big because I think it still comes back to how do you see yourself? What is it that you want to do or that you've done? Again, going back to that toxic positivity is not that bad. Saying that if someone is experiencing something, or you don't have to worry about that. You already have this. Your purpose is, and you're telling the people what it is based off of what you view. And so many people are trying to live up to what they believe others want them to be. So when someone comes and they're saying, I'm trying to find my purpose and I have these unanswered questions, I'm generally asking, um, what about that question um, resonates with you? When you talk about purpose, what does that look like? So that we can define that in their for themselves.
Yeah.
You tell me what purpose is, and that helps me work because how I may view it may not be how you see it. And so wanting to know how do you value yourself when we talk about worth? Who do you believe that you are? What skills do you have? Um, what has been told to you? What have people said you are? And from that, what have you decided to say that you are as well? From the tree that bears the fruit, there's always the roots. And so
Yes.
what is coming from that? And sometimes we can the tree can bear fruit and the fruit be no good. So I
Yes.
come back and we talk about what's happening, what were the roots, and we talk about that. And usually when I'm having people say I'm trying to figure out my purpose and what does that and what does that look like, then it becomes um what has happened that led you here. And usually purpose is, I won't say usually because I don't want anyone to think that that's all in all ways, but what I have seen, sometimes purpose has been connected to there being some loss or disruption in the person's life, and now they're coming to see how can they repair what has happened by determining their purpose. And that purpose question or seeking that, I found that to sometimes um, mask and not fully acknowledge um, what is truly happening. And I hope I answered. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because a lot of times people think purpose as a destination,
Oh
when
yeah, yeah.
it's actually kind of a process more
Oh
so.
yeah, yeah,
Following
yeah.
the process of that purpose
Mm-hmm.
versus
Mm-hmm.
the end goal, like whatever fruits at the end. So I think that makes sense. Now, speaking on purpose, end goal, and process, you
Mm-hmm.
were bold enough to start your own business.
I love that bold.
What was that like? Let's start off with the beginning of the thought of starting your own business to actually now you're operating and serving the people that you want to serve. Like, what was that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I knew once I returned to school, I graduated undergrad with a psychology degree, returned back to school after being married with three little people, and knew that I wanted to have my own practice. So that was the objective in returning back to school. I had held administrative roles within the social service arena, and when I decided to return to school, I knew that the end was going to be my own practice. I didn't know when it was because I did find myself as this non-traditional student in a sense, with a family, with a home, with children, and saying, okay, well, I've got to work though. And so I continued to work my full-time job, and it was about maybe 4 years after graduating from grad school where I said, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move into this practice. But I had a friend who knew that I said I wanted to be in private practice, who at the time in the office space where I am now, had their own, they had a business here, and they said I talked to the landlord, and they have an empty office space, and here's their number, because they said, when are you going to do it? And I'd said a prayer, said how much we could afford with me paying for an office space without me having any clients. And I called them, and I called the landlord, spoke to them, and the office space was $50 less than what I said I could budget to pay. And I said, "Is this a sign?" Um, and and said, "Okay." I signed a 6-month lease and moved in, and within about 3 months after signing the lease and having to go through all the things that you have to do in the county to get your business and all those things, I had my first client. And from there, I saw clients in the evenings and on Saturdays. and um, my job where I was working full time ended January of 2019, and I've been working full time in my practice since January of 2019. It was it was a natural progression. I didn't know how I was really going to do it because they don't talk to us about that in grad school, Randall. They don't tell us what it requires to start a practice, to build a business, a brand, or any of that. There's no marketing class that's offered to us, but you know, um, but I knew that this was, like I said, the objective of returning to school. I knew I wanted to do and have a private practice.
And in finance, we call our offerings sometimes products, services. How would you define today the services that you're offering to the society? Like if you were to group them up and define them, what services are you offering today?
Hmm. You know, and I say services when I'm responding, and then hearing it in a way of how I would describe it. As I said, the demographic that I work with are adults and couples, and in that realm, I am offering one-on-one client services to persons who are experiencing depressive symptoms, anxiety, life transition, grief. Also, that existential question of purpose. Why am I here? We're having those questions and life transitions. And with my couples, premarital counseling, couples counseling for married couples, and then for individuals who are in relationships who are looking to enhance that. In addition to that, I also provide consulting services. So I work with varying organizations, for profit, and nonprofit churches, and helping them and assisting them in creating wellness initiatives. So I do training and workshop presentations to them, in addition to providing, when my schedule permits, anger management and parenting classes. And so those are my offerings. And that has changed and grown. I found myself doing more speaking and presentations and workshop for community than I initially thought that I would. I love that piece, but right now I think that that's how I would describe those services. I need to go back and see, what did I write on my website.
Yeah, it's tough. You build different things. They're all related, but you build them up over time and they do add up
Yeah.
fast. Now, you have these services, but as every
Mm-hmm.
business owner knows, you have to price these things. What
Mm-hmm.
am I
Mm-hmm.
going to charge the greater community? What's fair as far as what the person can afford? What's fair as far as supporting my lifestyle? What was your pricing journey like? How did you think about that?
Um, Well, one of the things is that I do accept insurance, so I'm on insurance panels. And one of my things is that when we talk about access and affordability, that was a main component of my practice. Um, I do want to eat and live well, but I do offer services and accept insurance, because that's one of the hindrances when we talk about persons that are in marginalized communities, specifically African American, um, and even with my population, I've worked with um, Hispanic and Latino clients, or Latino clients. um, and everyone, white client. I have everyone. I see everybody. I see everybody, and I'm so grateful that that I'm a space where they can be able to see me as a person who can help them. But one of the things is that I wanted to make sure that I could accept insurance, so I did that. And the other, that I do have persons who don't have insurance. Some are entrepreneurs and they pay out of pocket. And when I began the pricing space, it was for me to assess, what am I offering, those services, time being a factor, and then also what did that look like in me being able to create a sustainable business. And so one of the things, as I'm talking to persons and serving as a supervisor persons who are working on licensure is having that conversation, is that you don't just want to charge what someone else is charging. You want to have a real conversation about what it is, what's required to maintain your business. Um, how do you pay for the things that you need, the hours that we have to have, the rent space, all of those things. And so I took those things into account when I was doing that, and had to have my own money conversation around what that looked like, what was money for me in growing up, and wrestle with that, and then come to terms to say, this service that I provide has value, and there is a cost for that. And me pricing is not that I don't want anyone to be able to afford it, but I also have to be able to afford it, and being able to do this. And so it was a lot of sitting with myself and kind of crunching the numbers to see, and then also speaking with my colleagues about um, what do they charge, and so that you can know what that is, and not having that fear. Many people talk about pricing yourself out. You don't want to charge too much because then they won't pay you. And then you have to figure out what's too much. And then again, going back to that may be your money story about too much. So it was a little tug of war there. But I figured it out.
I know for me personally, the struggle was, can somebody afford it? That was one aspect of it. But then as I done this work more and more, a lot of it's like, do the client prioritize it?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people spend money on things that they want to spend money on.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I fit in that pecking order? Where should I fit in that pecking order? Did you have a similar journey as far as like, yeah, it may seem like a premium relative to the market, but
Mm-hmm.
I know my client base is still spending on XYZ. Or do you see it that way at all?
Well, I think amongst us clinicians, I know that has come up in some of the conversations that I've been a part of, and talking about how much people spend someplace else. I think that also takes us into the space of trying to figure out, attach again our worth to someone else's spending, or how someone else's lifestyle is, which is where I've again had to separate, rather than thinking about whether or not they can afford it. Again, going back to what is my purpose and reason for this price. The
Mhm.
price isn't about whether or not it's affordable for the people. It's about, this is what I'm going to need in order to maintain my practice. If I charge anything less than this, then I will not have a viable business. And so this is what I have to charge. There are persons, depending who, and there are ranges within this field and offering. Some may charge 65, and some may charge 300. Um, and it could vary depending on where you live, your education, your experience, if there's a specialty. There's so many factors that are associated with that. I, again, as I was saying, even when we were talking about the couples and individuals, the adults that I work with, it's still an individualized space that you have to say, okay, what is it that I can do? Because people are spending money on what they want to spend money on, and then just when we talk about both, I think both of our fields, wait, I got to spend money on you to show me how to save money. I got to spend money on how to feel better when I'm coming to you because I'm depressed because I don't have any money. So those can be factors, but then it's also, this is what I have to, this has to be the rate in order for me to have the business. In order for me to be here, this is the rate that I have to have.
I like that. Yeah, I think of it as like a ecosystem. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm charging a fee in which my clients can still thrive financially, which
Mm-hmm.
hopefully empowers the community, which hopefully will bring more clients back my way. Like, how do you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
perpetuate that cycle? So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, practice owners, people in the therapy world, they think about public speaking. Public speaking
Hmm.
because one, they want to get a message out, or two, they want to
Hmm.
get their name and their brand out there. How
Hmm.
do you think about public speaking, and what was your journey as far as charging fees? Because that's a tough thing for public speakers.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I love it. I love and it's not ego driven. It's really about the education and creating a space where some persons may be hesitant to speak about their mental wellness um, or speak about their lived experience that may have caused some challenges in a closed space, and that sometimes you can speak up and out and share information, and people may be encouraged to go, or to even say, wait, that I am feeling that, maybe I can go and have a conversation about that. So I love being in that space. um, the other is when we talk about pricing, those are different things. So my rate for individual therapy is not the rate for me to present, to create workshops, because there's a different skill and time associated with that, as well as the speaking. And so it's about I did look and see what were the trends around pricing for that. And then also coupling that with skill. I tell everyone that I've been speaking in front of someone and for audiences since I was a kid. My mother, I was this, I thank her for it, but at the time I was so afraid. I'm an introvert. Many people don't believe that when I'm speaking, um, because I am animated and demonstrative and show up in the space wanting the people to engage. But I was also a shy kid. But I don't know if my mom knew it or if it was something just telling her this is what she needed to know. But I've been speaking since I was about 14 years old. I was on somebody's program speaking someplace, so it came natural. I didn't know it. You go back and you can look when we talk about your story. But I think that was the biggest thing, is just wanting what is my purpose, and then the time that's associated with it, and that helped me with pricing. And there was that fear though with that. Do I want to price myself out? But then what is pricing myself out? Um, and so one little trick of the trade is asking persons what have they budgeted for. So if you're uncomfortable in starting new, what is your budget for your speaker? Is there a set honorarium? And then I decided, I'm still wrestling with what is my fee for nonprofit organizations, because there is a desire to continue to support those arenas where maybe their finances may be limited. But again, what are you presenting? What is the service? What is the value associated with the service, and the time to create and be present for that?
Yeah, that's always tough. What have you seen come of speaking regularly? Like what are the benefits for your business
Mm.
that you've seen public speaking result?
From that, I've garnered clients, um, possibly from every space where I've spoken.
Mm,
Um, I believe, truly believe, this is where I'm supposed to be. I don't have many marketing ploys. I'm not a face that's on the social media platforms. I want to get out there and say something, but I think I'm thinking too hard about that, Randall, about what to say. Um, but I've gotten clients from my speaking engagements, and then the biggest thing that has been even more rewarding than the clients has been someone saying what it was for them, what they received, and that again is the objective. So that if no one calls me and says I want to work with you, but someone says what you said was this for me, and I didn't know them, I just happened to be there and they just came to say that to me, and then they were gone, then what I did um, was what needed to be done, because my work isn't just about promoting all in due time. my work is about people being well. And so, and again, I want to say, I don't mind people calling me. So if anyone sees this and says, I want to come see Tonika, I don't mind that. But my real and true goal is that people are well. And if I can be the catalyst or the conduit that helps them get to that, then the goal has been met.
Makes sense. So you've been at this for a little time now. So you started off part-time, working a job, and then doing counseling. You hopped into it full-time. What financial advice would you give young practice owners, somebody aspiring to go into practice, about how to
Mhm.
manage their finances as a business owner?
Mm. I would say definitely have some of these conversations. Call Randall. If you're just getting started, if you're seeing this, call Randall. He'll help you. But um, I would say to have some true conversations about your wanting to have this practice and start this business. Where are you emotionally and mentally? Because there may be some moments where, specifically if you're in insurance, you're accepting insurance, there's a timeline between submitting and payment. And so, because there's that gap that's in between, figuring out how do you manage and sustain your practice without that, I would definitely encourage looking at what your budget is today. Budget meaning what's coming in and going out, not and realistically, write it all down from what you spend, and then saying what is it that you want to make,
Mhm.
right? Really saying that. What is it that you want to make? And from a realistic space, not about, we see all these things that are saying you can be a six-figure therapist. But then how do you do that, right? And in what way? And if it's six figures that you want to earn, then how do you do that with the skills that you have, with the demographic that you want to serve, in the climate that we're in, all those things, you have to consider those things. Um, and then being honest with yourself about, what does it look like for you to work. Many people think I'm in private practice, so I'm not going to work every day, and I'm not going to work on Saturdays, and I'm going to get off at 5 o'clock. you know really looking at all those things, because that plays a role in your finances. um how many clients do I want to have? Can I have? Um, assessing all of those things. But the biggest thing is, really would say, especially if you're not going to just be cash pay, and if you're
Mhm.
taking insurance, is for you to look at all of those things. Depending on how you process your payments, you're talking anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for payments from some providers. And so you have to consider all of those factors. Speak with someone who's doing the work. If you see someone out there who is doing the work and you're interested in, knowing more about it, ask questions. Do your research. um, and if you're in grad school now and your schedule permits, um, maybe take a finance class, or find some finance classes online. But you don't have to do this blindly. It's so many resources. So I would say study, research, ask questions.
So when you went on your own, you were a whole mom, right? Um,
A whole mom. Yes.
and you have a spouse. So what would you advise somebody having a conversation with their spouse? Because I think we talk about the struggles we go through as a business owner, but people who we marry or partner up with, they actually have to sacrifice as well. It's not just
Hmm.
a,
Hmm.
a, a win for them. So what was the conversation that you had with your spouse? What advice would you give to spouses of those aspiring to be entrepreneurs? Because
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
what they go through.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Again, I believe being able to, in some business schools, they teach you that elevator speech. I think you need to have your elevator speech for yourself, so that you can say what is driving you to do this. What is your goal? around starting your business. What is it that you want to see in those outcomes? Being able to say that to yourself, right? Believing it for yourself. And then when you're having this conversation, speaking in the right now moment rather than projecting out future wise. This is where we are today. This is what we have in our possession today. This is what we owe, where we live, and talking about right now. And then saying, how does what you want to do fit in the right now? And then once you talk about that, you talk about what and how does that align with your long-term goals that hopefully you've already talked about as a couple, and not just financially, but rearing your children, living, loving, however it may be. And you can talk about how those things will mesh and meld together. Um, the other is having that full conversation, as we just talked about with those finances, talking about what does this look like? What is the time that's associated with this? What are your hours? What flexibility will need to exist between the relationship dynamic? What supports will you need from them? And then asking your partner, what supports will they need? Right? What will you need to support me? If we're talking about not just cash pay and we're talking insurance pay, then love, I can see 20 clients in a week. And of those 20 clients, I can take their copay, but it's going to be another 3 weeks. I may see them two more times before I get the check for the last time. So this is what I'm expecting, or this comes in at this time. Having those conversations about it so that it's not this frustration. You hadn't got your check yet? Blue Cross Blue Shield hadn't paid you, um, so that you have some of those conversations. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that we again have these conversations before we have to have the conversation. If you're partnered, and or married, and you're talking about wanting to start a business, that you're not just in this silo creating this thing by yourself and then hoping to just pop out and have this thing the way you want it. That you're coming and saying, hey, this is what I have so far. I got my website, read my website. I have my business cards, help, this is what I designed. I'm going to pay for this directory, and so this is how much this is going to cost. But having these real conversations, and then being gracious to one another, if partners are and spouses are listening to this as well, that if you didn't have that conversation about that thing, if it was something that you didn't know about, being able to say, we didn't know because we didn't know. And now we know, let's talk about it.
I think that's important. Yeah, I think if you are in a partnership with somebody who's a small business, you are a small business owner as well. you,
Yes, we're in this
you
together.
and they're going to, even if you're like not even close to the business, they're going to throw some ideas at you. They can't help themselves. Um,
Mm-hmm.
might as well strap on in and ride.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, this is part of the show where I take my poison. You work with a lot of adult clients, some who
Mm-hmm.
have financial planners. What can financial planners do better to serve the people that you serve?
Mm. Um, I love what you are doing, specifically, Randall, is making yourself available, right? That people can find you. I think, and you're relatable in terms of accepting of where people are. You're not saying that you have to have this already. And many people are believing that they have to be in a certain financial bracket or place of earning before they talk to someone about um, building their wealth, before they talk about supports and in ways of tackling debt. And so I think that one of the things is to speak to the people from general speak, not talk about you can have this, you get with me, you're gonna have all these things. You think you're gonna be able to pay for your children and go to college and do all this. Rather than this fast talk, is meet the people where they are and speak layman terms with regard to that. I'm saying that and of course there are different financial planners who are working with folks who may make 7 figures or higher, or they're higher earning 6 figure clients. But in my practice, I have persons in varying income brackets. And so when I talk to them about where they are, because their finances may come up as a strain or a challenge for them, which is um, part of their reason for seeing me, why they're having some of the anxieties and things like that, is that if financial planners again meet people where they are, allow themselves to be accessible, um, and accessible meaning not where you just have to be searched out, but I can see myself um, working with someone, and then also talking to them about the feelings that are associated with money.
Mhm.
And I think that sometimes there's an absence of that. That if someone is coming to you and there is some shame that they're believing that something's wrong with them for not having planned out, I think that that's something that needs to be discussed, that we can talk about. You know, it sounds like if someone tells you that they had a job loss or a death in their family, or um, they haven't had any promotions, or they've been at a job for a long time, that you're asking questions about who the person is, not where you're trying to do my role, but having a full understanding of the person, because that is connected to our finances, which goes back to when we talked earlier about money story. What are you telling yourself? Or what have you seen, or what is the story connected to earning? And I think that plays a role.
I think that's huge. Yeah, I think in my space, they want financial planners to turn over a financial plan in 2 months. Well, in
Yeah.
certain circumstances, certain individuals who are going through situations, it could take 2 years
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
sit with them and go down that journey. And yes, I can write up something real quick, submit it, and I'm done. And I don't have to talk
Mm-hmm.
to them but like once or twice a year. But that's not for me personally. That's not doing the job. The
Mm-hmm.
job called for. So thank you for that. Thank you. Now, if somebody is listening to this, they say, "Hey, I need
Mm-hmm.
I'm partnering up with somebody and I'm having challenges, or I'm going through something with the job loss or something personal. I need to talk to somebody." Or if I'm an organization, I'm like, she needs to speak at my next event. What is the best way they can reach out to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the best way to reach out to me, you can go to my website, which is www.indewtime.com. That's INDEWTIME.com. I'm also on Instagram. Is in due time, IN_due time. You can find me there. And Facebook, all in due time on Facebook. But I would say contact me on by email. That would be probably the best way to reach me, and for me to reach back out to you and have conversation. If you're wanting me to speak and work with your organization, I'd be more than happy to do that. And I believe that in individual processing and creating information that's specific to your audience as well.
I like that. That's awesome. And FYI, her details will be in the description in the video below. So you just click, go to her website, reach out to her, and her contact information. Well, thank you very much, Tonika Dew Evans, licensed professional counselor. What you shared as far as couples work, losing of jobs, operating a business, starting from zero, going to where you are today, I think is going to be very valuable. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Randall, for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you. Mhm.
Feeling the pressure? You're not alone. I'm Randall Lavery with Diesel Wealth Management, and I specialize in simplifying wealth for those who are near retirement and business owners. We'll create a plan that fits your unique needs so you can actually enjoy the wealth that you built. We consider our firm results driven with a touch of fun. Ready for clarity? Click the Learn More and schedule your free discovery call. Let's build the financial future together.
Make it rain, make it rain.